you please share one piece of career advice you wish someone had given you when you started out?
I have to go back a long way to think of this one because my career started many, many years ago. But if I had that time and someone was to give me that piece of advice that I think would have changed the way my career progressed, it would be simply that confidence is key. Knowledge and understanding and being right is one thing, but actually you can be as right as you can be. But if you're not confident about it, then, it's going to be difficult for you to express that rightness, that correctness. So I was involved in a very technical area through my career in law, and it's black and white, it's right or it's wrong. And even though I knew I was right, and even though I knew I had case law and precedent, everything to back me up, I still lacked the confidence. And because of that lack of confidence held me back for so long. And it wasn't until one day someone said to me, I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt, that the penny actually dropped and how valuable the confidence was. And it's more important sometimes than being right. If you want people to come on a journey with you, if you want to influence people's decisions and choices and judgments, confidence is what they're looking for. They're not necessarily looking for you to have all the right answers. And that was the mistake I made. I thought being right was everything, but I think on reflection, it's secondary to confidence.
Now, I suppose being in an area where you have got that sort of clear objectivity of black and white, it helps as well. Because if you know you're right, you can just be confident and get stuff done. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And equally, you can be as confident in vagaries as well, because in vagaries, it's actually easier to be confident because the more vague it is, the less people would say, oh no, he's wrong. Whereas when I was DM, you've got some very black and white things and they can distinctly point and say, you're wrong. But that's okay because you're allowed to be wrong. We're all human.
Yeah.
Confidence, I think, carries the day.
Yeah, it's like you said, having people on board and going on that journey with you is sometimes more than half the battle to have the right people around you. So having them there and going through what might be the sort of vaguer areas to get to a good point, it's definitely going to be important to have that confidence, I imagine. So definitely a good piece of advice. Can you please share a pivotal moment in your career that has made a significant impact for you?
Yeah, and I thought, again, I've had a few different career choices over the years, and I don't think it was a moment. I think it was a period of time where I became awakened to. So the journey was when I joined the police, and I got to see a side of society that I didn't know existed. And it's not shown on the television, it's not read in the papers. There's a side of society that never gets reported on, and it's a dark side. And I remember, after being in the job maybe 3 months, I remember thinking about my previous jobs and thinking, context is an amazing gift. And when you're dealing with life-threatening situations, suddenly the fact that you may have missed the invoice date by a month or by a week or a couple of days, it doesn't really seem anywhere near as important as it did at the time when it happened. And so whenever I get to a point where I'm maybe anxious or I'm making something out of an issue, I think there's something there, I always go back to this memory that I have, which was of a guy lying on the floor with a knife in his belly. Apologies for being brutal, but that was the scene I was confronted with, and that was the moment where I realized, do you know what? Maybe some things aren't as bad as this. And so sometimes I guess however bad things seem, trust me, could be a lot worse. So context for me was the moment, and that was the lesson. And it was just getting to see that actually I didn't know that side of life existed. And once you see it, suddenly everything else seems to have a framework where something that may have been a huge stressful thing for me historically, I would look back now, I would look at that same thing now and go, don't sweat the small stuff.
How do you approach challenges and setbacks in your professional life, and what's your go-to strategy to overcoming them?
So this is an interesting one. I've had a number of mechanisms for coping over the years, but I tend to move from one to the next because the previous one didn't work. But the one that actually has worked for me most recently and continues to work is there's a series of steps that I take. So if something that I don't like, I become something adverse or unexpected, happens to me. I'm passionate about what I do, so I tend to feel it hard. So if a decision is taken at work, for example, I might be passionate about a piece of work, it doesn't get funded, I used to take that and think, wow, I've been defeated. And so you get that kind of beaten back, and you want to just return to a safe place for a while where you can just go, I'm beaten down, and I just need some space. What I've learned over the life is that there's no way to be safe. And equally, if you want to be great at what you do, there is no safe way to be great. So it's an interesting conundrum. There is no great way to be safe, but there's no safe way to be great. So life is about taking, risks here and there. And when you come off the kind of the short end of that, that kind of decision or that judgment, I've started to look for the opportunity, because I kind of believe life is, there's a polarity to life. And just like as in physics, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I started to think, well, maybe is life the same? So where there's a negative something happening to me, does that mean there's a positive somewhere else? So maybe if I look for that positive, then I can understand, maybe it counterbalances negative. And I thought it was just pure supposition and maybe just read too many fantasy books, right? But I actually tried it the last few times that I kind of went into that, found myself in that place. It actually worked. I instead of thinking about all the things I could have done better, should have done, I actually turned all that energy and said, so where's the silver lining here? And so it happened not so long ago. There's like a period of uncertainty. So rather than allow the uncertainty to swallow me up, I actually started to look for things that I could proactively do that would be like ways of me getting out of that uncertainty.
Yeah.
I didn't just sit there and dwell on it. So for me, it's about feeling it, understanding it, right? And then trying to find the positive. And there is always a positive if you look hard enough. And that's how I get through. But it's important that you learn why it happened, so that you evolve as a person. You don't necessarily make any mistakes or misjudgments again. You learn from that, but it doesn't always have to be a negative outcome. It can be positive.
Yeah. And in that process where you mentioned there's some steps, are you specifically always viewing these with the same attitude and thought process, or are you taking stock of what's there as a whole picture and then reassessing and trying to put a positive spin or looking for the positive that way? Like what is your process for the most part with that?
So what I tend to do is I tend to kind of let myself just ignore it for about 24, 48 hours, right? Just if there's any emotional side of it, I avoid any trigger.
Decompress.
That would trigger that. Yep. I allow it just to sink in. Then what I do is I look for in the present, in the actual, say it's a decision that didn't go my way. I look in the decision, is there anything I can do? Is there something that has come out of that decision? So whilst it may have been a no, is there a partial yes there somewhere that maybe I could look at? If I don't have any joy there, I go back one step and say, okay, well, what was the context within which we made that decision? So if we made that decision, are there any other decisions that we should be making? So I start to think about, and I just start to kind of put the onion back together, if that means. So if you imagine you're right at the core of the onion, I'm putting the layers back on as I move out. And at some stage, you will hit a layer where you think, yes, there is a way. And as long as you can then go back down through the layers to get to where you want it to be, that's how I get it to work. And I'm 2 for 2 so far. 2 for 2.
Work it out. Perfect. No, I really appreciate the answers, and it's great to hear your thoughts and insight on them.
Thank you.